Hello everybody and welcome to a special episode of Overwatch This.
I think they're all special.
Well, they are all special. This one we're going to talk about the making of Overwatch. And specifically, we're going to talk about how basically Overwatch was made in 2 weeks, right, Ben?
Yeah, that's pretty much the story that came out of this one, yeah.
So, it's a little bit of background on this. There was a talk at the DICE event, which stands for stuff, by our favourite Overwatch developer, Mr. Jeff Kaplan, and he gave us a load of background into basically how Overwatch was born, some stuff we sort of knew and some stuff we definitely didn't, but it's really, really interesting. So if you want to watch the whole video, do watch the whole video. We will link to it and it'll be in the post, etc. But we're going to break it down for you in super quick-ish form here. So Ben, tell us about how Overwatch got made.
So everyone kind of knows about Project Titan, which was meant to be Blizzard's next MMO, and it really was, I think, kind of meant to be a successor to World of Warcraft. I doubt they were going to shut that down because, it's a game with however many players, but that was what they were working on. Jeff Kaplan was on the team, Chris Metzen was on the team. It was sort of like a Blizzard All-Star thing. And they had loads of developers working on it, about 140, he said. And in May 2013, they went, this isn't working. And they shut it down. And that's pretty impressive. Like, they've been working on this for a good number of years. I think at least like 4 of full development by that point.
Wow.
And they just decided it wasn't going to work.
Imagine that many people spending that long doing something they've just gone, nah.
Yeah, exactly. We're not talking about like minimum wage students here either. Like, these guys were spending a lot of money, a lot of time on this. They shut it down and they said this isn't working. And the devs all got redistributed. 80 of them got permanently redistributed to other teams. 20 went on short-term loan, short-term in this case being like 6 months to 2 years or something, and 40 of them stayed to stay on this Team 4, as they call it, which was a new Blizzard project. And I assume the management kind of came up with this ultimatum that was, look, in 6 weeks you're going to present something to us, and we're going to decide, is this going to be the next big Blizzard game?
It's amazing. I mean, like, given how long game development cycles are and how much of that is even spent like conceptualizing what it is, 6 weeks to go, right, show us something, and then we'll basically decide if you guys have jobs and if there's a future in anything you've done.
Yeah, it takes me 6 weeks to come up with a decent pun.
It's remarkable. And so I mean, what's equally remarkable and has directly led to the in no way clickbaity title of this video is they not only did they have 6 weeks, they decided, well, that's too easy. So we'll split that 6 weeks into 3 2-week chunks and basically try and conceptualize 3 different projects in 2 weeks each, which is total madness, but that's basically what they did.
Yeah, and he talks about how there wasn't a lot of hope, and they were really worried about this. They weren't going to get fired, but the 40 would then be redistributed as well. They liked working together, etc., etc. So yeah, the first 2 weeks they talked about making another MMO that was set in a current Blizzard property. The only real examples of that would either be Diablo or StarCraft. I would guess it would be StarCraft for various reasons. That's a whole other video that we could go into at a future date. They then spent another 2 weeks thinking about another MMO that would be set in a new IP that would presumably use some of the ideas from Titan, but would be something totally new for Blizzard. And then after that, they kind of, while they were working on that, they realized, hey, we've got all this really nice character art and we've got all these really good class ideas, but what if we don't make an MMO with them? And then that's where kind of the idea of Overwatch came from. And a lot of that was down to a couple of guys, Jeff Goodman, who we now know as the class designer on Overwatch, and Arnold Sang, who I think is the artist we've seen on stage a couple of times.
Right, okay, so they did that, and basically the reason this has all come to light now is because of all the chatter we had a few days ago about a potential new Overwatch character who isn't a potential new Overwatch character, but had there was discussion about that, but then she's 11 years old, and, as we've said, you can't really put her in the middle of a battlefield. Yeah. The art that surfaced about her and her spider tank, or the spider tank, is from this early development period, right?
Yeah, so it looks like this happened either during that last 2 weeks or after they'd already decided that Overwatch was going to be the project. A guy called Ben Zhang, who I believe is still at Blizzard, he's worked on Hearthstone, he's done a load of other stuff. He's one of their really good artists that makes stuff in their style. And about June 2013, he created this bit of art that became so popular over the last week or so that they showed originally at BlizzCon 2014 that was like this gameplay proof. So it was like what the game might look like, but as concept.
Yeah, it's sort of full. Yeah, it's a first-person perspective. gun into the screen, but it's like a drawing.
It looks like they're controlling Reaper, basically.
Yeah.
And there's a number of identifiable characters, and then in the centres there's this big robo spider. And then during the talk, Kaplan then went, "That's not who you think it is, by the way," to the subreddit. And that's kind of why all this has come up now.
Yeah, so I mean, there's quite a lot we can talk about, but I mean, there were a load of parameters, I suppose, they set themselves in terms of what they wanted to do, in terms of like the setting, how they wanted to look, real world settings, but with a spin, and he goes into detail on quite a lot of that, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting because he talks about how they wanted to create something that was based in the real world, which is something that Blizzard haven't done before, and all the challenges surrounding that. Because if you say somebody's from a certain part of Azeroth or a certain planet in the StarCraft universe, nobody has any identification with that. But if you say somebody is from Britain, a lot of people start assuming things, and if you then present that person in a certain way, people can get very offended, for example, or their assumptions can be realised or otherwise, and there's a lot of kind of pre-made thought about that from people, and that's very different to how they've made games in the past, and this was true of environments as well. And what they wanted to do was create a game that was more hopeful for the future than your average kind of Call of Duty or something like that, where all you see is bombed out buildings and that sort of thing. And that's fine because that creates an environment that a certain type of game can take place in. But they wanted to try and do something very different. And he talks specifically about, for example, Iraq and how we often see Iraq portrayed in media is these bombed out buildings and dusty streets and that sort of thing. And what they created was the map Oasis, which is this super technological city created by scientists and great thinkers trying to create a better future. And it all kind of ties into this idea that the team itself was, back in May 2013, was having a bad time of it, didn't know what the future was like, and wanted to imagine a great future for themselves. And then, as he says at the end of the talk, they've had a good launch, a reasonable time. Yeah,
it's a really nice story, and it's the kind of story that, other than like when you get good like in-depth interviews with people, you don't really hear about developers. You don't really hear the kind of personal side of why they chose what they chose, or even if they did, it usually feels way more born out of like, well, we did some great market research and we decided that players really respond to X, Y, Z. To kind of think that this is a group of guys who are going through a difficult transitional period, and some of that is resulting in what we've got now. You can be cynical about it, but I just think it's really nice and seems really genuine. And like, there's some quite nice little anecdotes about, for instance, like the Dorado map, which isn't actually based on somewhere in Italy, in Mexico at all, right?
Yeah, it's based on the city in Italy. They Googled colourful Mexican town and they went, oh, that's a really nice picture. Didn't look up where it was from. And then I think he says a couple of months later, once the map had been made, somebody went, that's Manarola, Italy, by the way. And they were like, well, all right, but that's what they wanted it to look like. That's the future they wanted to imagine.
It's also great to know that even in such grand organisations and enormous projects like this, Google image search is still the first place people go. And then, I mean, there's also a lot of stuff about, like, there's, variety in Overwatch characters has always been a big thing. But he addresses specifically that it wasn't the fact that they set out to make, like, diversity the be-all and end-all, although it is very heavily linked to what they did want to do with the characters.
Yeah, so he talks about how they wanted to have inclusivity and open-mindedness when it came to creating characters. So just being like, wherever you are on Earth, even if there isn't a character that is from where you're from or a map that is from where you're from, you can imagine there being one. And the natural result of that, he says, is diversity. And they wanted to challenge stereotypes as well as embrace some. Like, there's McCree, who's like this all-American kind of badass, but then there's also, his example is Anna Amari, who is an Egyptian mother, which, who is also a sniper, which just isn't a character, as far as I know, that I've ever come across in anything before.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I think they've done it in a couple of ways. One is they've either put sort of stereotype characters and given them a new spin in terms of, like, you wouldn't expect them to be where they are as a part of this organization or as a part of these battles, or, like you said, they've taken people and just put them in a completely different zone to where you'd associate, like, that person, that gender or age or background or whatever. So I think it's quite nice from that perspective. And I guess all of this kind of, as we've said, it's been born out of and ties up with the discussion of who's next. Obviously, Overwatch This, which came out a couple of days ago, you should go and watch. But where are we left with as a result of this talk and all the speculation?
Well, yes, you should definitely go watch the Overwatch This. It definitely hasn't been completely invalidated by what he said. Only about half of it. So so what he also did was at one point he showed a bunch of silhouettes, and one of those silhouettes was the robot that everyone is calling Athena, just because it's quite slender and it has her logo on its head. He didn't mention that at all, as opposed to when he showed the spider robot, he went, that's not who you think it is. What that means, I mean, everyone's sky-coded themselves so much at this point that nobody's got any idea what's really going on. But the now prevailing theory is that Effie is going to create the robot that Athena is implanted into as part of the storyline that we'll see playing out over the next couple of weeks.
So then does that... I'm confused now. Does that mean we think Athena's going to be the next character in some spider tank form?
No, so we think she's going to be in that slender robot form, and the spider tank is something entirely different that will come at some time in the future, maybe.
So we're now thinking not Doomfist, it'll be Athena next?
Yes.
Okay, well, more as we get it, obviously.
But we'll have something completely different to say by Monday, no doubt.
Yeah, quite.
So.
Keep up to date on the site. We've got all the breaking news, new Overwatch stuff all the time. We'll have another Overwatch This next week in which we will discuss all of this and more in greater depth, I'm sure. So thanks for watching. Do subscribe, hit the bell for more updates, always the bell, and tell us what you thought of the video and what you think of the making of Overwatch, and we will catch you next time.